Paul Craig Roberts, Trump blew it sums it up. By announcing intent to use force for regime change in Iran and Venezuela, to filling his cabinet with more deep state than Obama, here's how Trump blew it. Chuck Baldwin sums it up, Trump blew it. As further evidence for Chuck Baldwin's view, I add Trump's UN speech yesterday. There was Trump patting Washington on the back for its good deeds and humanitarian and democratic concerns for other countries, which apparently includes Washington's destruction in whole or part of 8 countries in the last 20 years, leaving ruin in place of once well-organized and well-functioning countries. What really stood out was Trump's commiseration with the Iranian and Venezuelan peoples as he piled on more sanctions. Washington's arrogance is astounding. Here was Trump telling the world that Washington has decided the best governments for Iran and Venezuela and intends to use force to put Washington's choice of government in office. Washington has been trying to overthrow Iran ever since the Iranian Revolution in 1978-79, when the Iranian people overthrew the ruling American vassal and established a government responsible to them instead of to Washington. Washington has been trying to overthrow Hugo Chávez's Bolivarian revolution since 1999, when Chávez took control of Venezuela's economy away from the foreign interests that had dominated the country. Washington's response to democracy has been to do everything in its power to wreck the Venezuelan economy and to threaten military invasion in order to recover control over Venezuelan assets. The lies that Trump told yesterday about Iran and Venezuela are like the lies that Washington told about Serbia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, Pakistan, and Syria, lies that were used to justify military actions that have destroyed the lives and prospects of millions of peoples. Trump, like his predecessors, sees these crimes against humanity as good deeds because they advance Washington and Israeli interests. All of these crimes have their origin in 9/11. The 9/11 Truth Movement has focused on disproving the official conspiracy theory without identifying the real culprits. Chuck Baldwin brings to our attention Christopher Boughton's book, which identifies those who are actually responsible for 9/11. He Blew It. By Chuck Baldwin. September 20, 2018. As the attacks on September 11 have been brought back to the forefront of my attention via the 17th anniversary of those attacks, it behooves me to not leave the subject without further observations. By now, any thinking person has had plenty of time to devote at least some study to what happened on September 11, 2001. And it is relatively safe to say that truly objective and reasoned people have concluded, to one degree or another, that what we have been told about the 9/11 attacks was mostly, if not completely, a bunch of hot air. In fact, as time goes by, more people come to doubt, if not totally disbelieve, the official story about 9/11. And that's putting it mildly. I will even go so far as to say that the only people today who actually believe the official story about 9/11 are the ones who have done absolutely no objective, independent study into the matter. And if the official narrative of 9/11 is false, logic and reason demand that those who were complicit in the attacks were people who were powerful enough and well positioned enough to be able to pull off the attacks without being discovered, while, at the same time, successfully implicating innocent people as being the perpetrators. Obviously, such a plan involves, at least to a degree, government resources. At this point, I think it is helpful to remind everyone that while government might be thoroughly inept about many, if not most, of its activities, no organization in the world spends more money and takes the combined efforts of more people to accomplish less good than America's federal government. The one thing that government is able to do exceptionally well is kill people and destroy property. No organization in the world is more proficient at killing people and destroying things than government. They are the world's foremost killing machines. R.J. Rummel's exhaustive research in Death by Government chronicles the fact that over 262 million people were murdered by despotic governments around the world during the 20th century alone. Government has killed more people than all of the gangsters, mass shooters and terrorists of the world combined, by a millionfold. To think that the attacks of 9/11 would be outside the realm of possibility for government culpability is the height of naivete. To any rational thinking person, The only entity that could pull off such an operation as brilliantly and seamlessly as the attacks on September 11 had to be government, or at least elements within government. Furthermore, the possibility that there was a collaboration of more than one government involved in the 9/11 attacks must also be considered highly likely. For all intents and purposes, there are only 3 governments in the world today that have the military and intelligence sophistication to pull off an elaborate attack, such as 9/11, inside the continental United States, the US, of course, Great Britain and Israel. Truly, anyone who thinks that 19 mostly uneducated and benighted Arabs from the Middle East could successfully abscond 3 Boeing 757 aircraft, circumvent and outsmart the most sophisticated and protected airspace in the world and expertly navigate those jet aircraft into a precision attack against ground targets that even many of the most highly skilled pilots in the world could not perform, all by taking a crash course in flying Cessna propeller airplanes, no less, is, well, gullible beyond all remedy. The 9/11 attacks were mass killing crimes. The perpetrators were master criminals. And they are still at large. Which brings me to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was elected president on the promise that he would drain the swamp and dismantle the deep state. And many conservatives and Christians thoroughly believe that Trump is actually doing what he promised. But is he? I think not. Donald Trump had one chance to prove that he was serious about draining the swamp and dismantling the deep state. One chance. That one chance was his first 2 years in office. And he blew it. Trump appointed more deep state CFR members and Bilderbergers, including Neil Gorsuch, James Mattis, John Bolton, et al., to his administration than Barack Obama. And don't be taken in by all of the political bickering surrounding Trump's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. The conservatives' defense of Kavanaugh is as irrelevant as the liberals' accusations against Kavanaugh. The fact is, Kavanaugh is a deep state toady who is up to his neck in covering up the government's murder of former Clinton Deputy White House counsel Vince Foster. Speaking of which, Trump has done nothing to bring the deep state witch, Hillary Clinton, to justice like he said he would do, either. In addition, and more relevant to the 9/11 discussion, Trump brought deep state warlock, Rudy Giuliani, to the White House. As mayor of New York City, Giuliani, more than any other single individual, provided cover for the real attackers of 9/11 by overseeing the massive effort of destroying the evidence from that horrific crime scene. Rudy Giuliani is the quintessential deep state operative. The criminals who masterminded and carried out the 9/11 attacks could not have succeeded without the help of Rudy Giuliani. He was a major player in 9/11. Yet, Trump brings this conscienceless deep state puppet into the White House and gives him one of the most trusted positions in his government. Had Trump been serious about draining the swamp and dismantling the deep state, he would have begun immediately after being inaugurated exposing the major deep state players from both parties, including the Clintons, Bushes, Dick Cheney, Giuliani, Michael Chertoff, etc., and from the alphabet agencies that have millions of skeletons, literally, in their bloody closets. But instead of exposing them, Trump continued to cover for them or even hire them. But instead of hiring deep state toadies like Giuliani, Trump should have created an independent commission to thoroughly investigate 9/11. If he had been serious about dismantling the deep state, that is exactly what he would have done. But he didn't, and he won't. He won't because Trump is determined to keep the crimes of the deep state covered up. Beyond that, the epicenter of the global deep state is Benjamin Netanyahu's Zionist state of Israel. And what does Trump do here? He panders to Israel, increases financial and military support for Israel, denies humanitarian funding for Israeli persecuted Palestinians, refuses to recognize Israel's illegal occupation of Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank, joins Israel in attacking Syria, amasses U.S. armed forces to assist Israel's myriad wars in the Middle East, etc., ad infinitum. Had Trump been serious about dismantling the deep state, he would have exposed Israel's bloodlust in the Middle East, its control over the U.S. Congress and the major news media and its manifold treacheries against the United States. And that includes exposing Israel's cold-blooded attack on the USS Liberty 50 years ago and Israel's complicity in the 9/11 attacks. Had Trump been serious about draining the swamp and dismantling the deep state, he would have also begun dismantling America's burgeoning police state. And, furthermore, he would have kept his promise to get our troops out of the deep state's perpetual war on terror in the Middle East. Trump did none of the above. Instead, he expanded and escalated all of the above. From this point on, it doesn't matter to a tinker's damn what Trump does or doesn't do, as he has proven that he either didn't mean a word he said while campaigning or didn't have the man stuff to actually follow through with what he promised. From now on, Trump will be simply dancing the famous Potomac two-step all over Washington, D.C. when he's not playing golf, that is. Yes, did you know that Trump has spent 25% of his time in office so far on the various golf courses he owns? That's a fact. Yeah. Chasing birdies is a great way to fight the deep state. Folks, let this sink in, the deep state has nothing to do with partisan politics. It has nothing to do with the entire left-right political wrangling, name-calling, posturing, etc., that consumes the mainstream media. All of that is nothing but public theater to distract the American people from what is really going on, or not going on. Donald Trump had one chance to prove he was serious about draining the swamp and dismantling the deep state, his first 2 years in office. And the 17th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks serves as just another reminder that he blew it. P.S. I, again, urge readers to buy Christopher Byron's masterful exposé on who and what was behind the 9/11 attacks and America's ongoing war on terror. The book is entitled The War on Terror, The Plot to Rule the Middle East. We have been bamboozled, folks. Everything we've been told about 9/11 and the war on terror is a big fat lie. And no one has done more investigative research exposing these lies than Christopher Byron. If enough of the American people could come to grips with the truth about 9/11 and the war on terror, it would change the course of history, save thousands and even millions of lives and, yes, save our republic. As it is, the deception of 9/11 and the war on terror envelops both political parties in Washington, D.C., including Donald Trump, and even America's pastors and churches. Byron's book shatters the myths and destroys the lies. It names names, tracks time and identifies the criminal cabal that masterminded the 9/11 attacks that took America into an everlasting, never-ending, perpetual war on terror that has killed millions and will kill millions more unless the American people wake up and put a stop to this global catastrophe.